I never imagined that after raising my daughter, Emma, on my own, the happiest day of her life would become the day I questioned whether I still belonged in my own family. My name is Margaret Collins. I'm 63 years old, a retired elementary school teacher, and a widow. My husband passed away from cancer when Emma was only 11. From that day forward, every decision I made revolved around giving my daughter the best life I possibly could. I worked extra tutoring jobs, sold my wedding jewelry to help pay for her college tuition, and spent countless nights wondering if I was enough for both parents. Emma never made me regret those sacrifices. She grew into a compassionate, intelligent young woman who had a way of making every room brighter simply by walking into it. When she called to tell me she'd gotten engaged to Daniel, I cried so hard that she laughed through the phone. "Mom," she teased, "you're supposed to save the tears for the wedding." "I've been saving them since the day you were born." For months, I happily helped with wedding plans whenever Emma asked. I addressed invitations, compared floral arrangements, and even spent weekends sewing small decorative table runners because she wanted something personal. Daniel was polite, though reserved. His mother, Victoria, was elegant but distant, always speaking with the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. His younger sister, Chloe, however, was another story. She carried herself as though every gathering revolved around her. At family dinners she corrected people, interrupted conversations, and somehow found a way to criticize even the smallest details. I ignored it. Not everyone has the same personality, I reminded myself. Then came the bridal shower. The room was filled with soft music, pastel decorations, and laughter. Friends and relatives surrounded Emma, who looked radiant in a simple white dress. Watching her smile filled my heart with peace. Until Chloe stood to give a toast. She raised her champagne glass with an exaggerated grin. "I've been thinking about the perfect wedding gift for Emma and Daniel." Everyone turned toward her. She looked directly at me. "And honestly," she said with a laugh, "the best gift anyone could give this new couple would be a little space." A few guests chuckled politely. She continued. "I mean, once children get married, parents should know when it's time to step aside. Don't you think?" Her eyes stayed fixed on me. The greatest wedding gift would be certain people finally leaving the family alone and letting the new couple start fresh. Silence settled over the room. I wasn't sure anyone else understood what she meant. I did. Emma immediately frowned. "Chloe, what are you talking about?" "Oh, don't be so sensitive," Chloe replied. "I'm just saying every family has someone who doesn't know when to let go." Victoria quietly sipped her drink without saying a word. Daniel stared at the floor. I forced myself to smile. I'm sure Chloe didn't mean anything personal. But she did. Everyone knew it. Emma reached for my hand beneath the table and squeezed it gently. "I'm sorry, Mom." "It's your celebration," I whispered. "Let's not ruin it." The party continued, but something had changed. People tried pretending nothing had happened, yet conversations became awkward. Smiles felt rehearsed. On the drive home, Emma insisted on apologizing again. "I don't know what's gotten into Chloe lately." "It's all right." "No, it isn't." She glanced at me with worried eyes. "You've done everything for this wedding." I smiled. "The wedding isn't about me. It wouldn't even be happening the way it is without you." That night I unpacked the small gifts I'd received from guests who wanted to thank me for helping organize the shower. A handwritten card slipped from one of the gift bags. There was no signature. It simply read, "Sometimes the people smiling at you are already planning how to push you out. Be careful who you trust before the wedding." My stomach tightened. It could have been a cruel joke. Or it could have been a warning. For the first time since Emma announced her engagement, I felt uneasy. The following week, Emma asked me to accompany her to the wedding venue for the final planning meeting. As we walked inside, I overheard voices coming from a conference room. Victoria spoke first. I still think Margaret is far too involved. Then Chloe laughed. Don't worry. After the wedding, she'll get the message. Another voice asked, how? Chloe answered without hesitation. She'll realize she's no longer part of this family. My heart pounded. Emma hadn't heard them yet. She was still walking behind me, checking messages on her phone. I stood frozen outside the door, wondering whether to walk away, or finally hear what they truly thought of me. Without realizing it, I reached for the doorknob. Whatever waited on the other side was about to change everything. Margaret's hand rested on the conference room doorknob, but she couldn't bring herself to push it open. Instead, she stood perfectly still, listening as the conversation inside continued. I just don't understand why Emma lets her mother make every decision, Chloe said. It's like Margaret thinks she's the one getting married. Victoria sighed. Emma has always been close to her. Once the wedding is over, things will settle down. They'll only settle down if someone makes it clear that Margaret needs to back off, Chloe replied. Otherwise she'll be at every holiday, every vacation, every family event. Margaret felt a sharp ache in her chest. She had never tried to control Emma's life. Every suggestion she'd made during the wedding planning had come because Emma had asked for help. Footsteps behind her broke the silence. Mom? Emma looked up from her phone, immediately noticing the expression on Margaret's face. Is everything okay? Margaret quickly stepped away from the door. I think they're still having a meeting. Before she could say anything else, the conference room door opened. Victoria smiled politely. Oh, Margaret. Emma. We were just discussing the seating arrangements. Chloe flashed the same cheerful smile she'd worn at the bridal shower. Perfect timing. Margaret searched Chloe's face for even the smallest hint of guilt but found none. The meeting began, and everyone acted as though nothing unusual had happened. The wedding planner reviewed flower placements, music selections, and the reception schedule. Margaret tried to focus, but Chloe's words echoed in her mind. She'll realize she's no longer part of this family. After the meeting, Daniel caught up with Margaret in the parking lot. Mrs. Collins? She turned. Please, call me Margaret. He nodded awkwardly. I wanted to apologize for Chloe. Margaret smiled gently. That isn't your responsibility. I know. He hesitated. But she's been saying things she shouldn't. Margaret studied him carefully. You've heard them? Daniel looked down. I have. And? He rubbed the back of his neck. I've told her to stop. But she hasn't. No. Margaret appreciated his honesty, even if it wasn't the answer she wanted. That evening, Emma came over for dinner. Neither of them mentioned the conversation at the venue. Instead, they cooked pasta together like they had hundreds of times before. Halfway through dinner, Emma suddenly put down her fork. Mom. Margaret looked up. Have I asked too much of you? What do you mean? The wedding. Margaret smiled. Helping you has been my favorite part. Emma looked relieved. I was worried everyone thought I depended on you too much. Does someone think that? Emma didn't answer immediately. Finally she admitted, Chloe keeps saying I need to choose between being your daughter and being Daniel's wife. Margaret felt her heart sink. Marriage doesn't erase family. I know. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I just don't understand why she keeps acting like you're the enemy. Margaret reached across the table and squeezed her daughter's hand. I'm not worried about Chloe. It wasn't entirely true. The following Saturday, the families gathered at the hotel for the rehearsal dinner. The ballroom looked beautiful. Soft golden lights reflected off crystal chandeliers, and elegant white flowers decorated every table. Margaret had spent weeks helping Emma choose those flowers. As guests arrived, Margaret noticed Chloe whispering to several relatives while occasionally glancing in her direction. A knot formed in her stomach. Later, during dinner, Chloe stood to make another toast. "I think we should thank everyone who helped make this wedding possible." The room applauded. Chloe smiled sweetly. "Especially those who know when it's time to let the happy couple start their own lives." Several people exchanged uncomfortable looks. Then Chloe turned directly toward Margaret. "I've always believed the greatest act of love is knowing when to let go." The room fell silent. Margaret slowly stood. She had spent weeks swallowing every hurtful comment. "Not tonight." "I agree," she said calmly. Everyone looked at her. Loving someone means letting them make their own choices. She looked toward Emma. "I raised my daughter to think for herself." Then she turned to Chloe. "If Emma ever tells me she needs space, I'll respect her immediately." She paused. "But that decision belongs to Emma. Not anyone else." The silence was so complete that even the waitstaff stopped moving. Emma stood beside her mother. "I've never asked my mom to step away." She looked directly at Chloe. "And I never will." Daniel finally spoke. "I agree with Emma." Victoria's expression tightened. Chloe forced a laugh. "I was only joking." Emma shook her head. "No. You've been making the same joke for months." The room remained quiet. For the first time, everyone saw the situation for what it truly was. Chloe wasn't teasing. She was trying to divide a family. The evening ended awkwardly, with guests leaving earlier than expected. As Margaret gathered her purse, an elderly woman approached her. It was Daniel's grandmother, Eleanor. She gently took Margaret's hand. "I've been watching everything." Margaret offered a tired smile. "I'm sorry you had to." Eleanor leaned closer. "There's something you deserve to know." Margaret's expression changed. "What is it?" Eleanor glanced around to make sure no one else was listening. "Chloe isn't acting alone." Margaret frowned. "What do you mean?" Eleanor lowered her voice. "Someone has been encouraging her from the very beginning." Margaret's heart skipped a beat. "Who?" Before Eleanor could answer, Victoria called from across the ballroom. "Grandma, we're leaving." Eleanor squeezed Margaret's hand. "We'll talk tomorrow." Then she walked away. Margaret watched her disappear through the hotel doors, realizing Chloe might not have been the true mastermind after all. Whoever was behind this had stayed hidden until now, and the wedding was only 3 days away. Margaret barely slept the night after the rehearsal dinner. Eleanor's unfinished warning echoed in her mind. Chloe isn't acting alone. The next morning, Eleanor called and asked Margaret to meet her at a small cafe near the church. When Margaret arrived, the elderly woman was already waiting with 2 cups of tea. "I owe you the truth," Eleanor said gently. Margaret sat quietly. For months, Victoria has been telling Chloe that once Emma and Daniel are married, your place in the family should become smaller. Margaret lowered her eyes. "I never wanted to take anyone's place." "I know." Eleanor sighed. Victoria was afraid that Daniel admired the relationship you and Emma shared. She worried Emma would always come to you before turning to her new family. Margaret shook her head. "Love isn't a competition." "Unfortunately," Eleanor replied, "Victoria believed it was." Margaret thanked Eleanor for her honesty, but she made one decision before leaving. She would not confront anyone before the ceremony. This day belonged to Emma. On the wedding morning, sunlight poured through the church windows. Guests filled the pews, smiling as soft music played. Margaret helped Emma into her wedding gown. "You look beautiful," Margaret whispered. Emma hugged her tightly. "I wouldn't be here without you." Margaret smiled through happy tears. "No, sweetheart. Today is about the life you're building." A knock came at the dressing room door. Daniel stepped inside. "I'm sorry to interrupt." Emma smiled. "What is it?" He looked at Margaret first. "I need to say something before the ceremony." He took a deep breath. "I heard my mother and Chloe talking last night." Margaret remained silent. "They admitted they've been trying to push you away ever since Emma and I got engaged." Emma stared at him. "You knew?" "I suspected." Daniel lowered his head. "But I should have stopped it sooner." Emma reached for his hand. "What happened?" "I told them that if they couldn't respect you, they wouldn't be welcome at our home after today." Margaret's eyes widened. "You didn't have to choose." Daniel smiled kindly. "I didn't choose between families. I chose respect." A few minutes later, the ceremony began. Guests stood as Emma walked down the aisle with Margaret beside her. The church was silent except for quiet music. Everything felt peaceful again. After the vows and the applause, everyone gathered for the reception. When it was time for speeches, Victoria unexpectedly stood. She looked nervous. "I wasn't planning to speak." The room became quiet. She turned toward Margaret. "I owe you an apology." Even Chloe looked surprised. Victoria continued. "I convinced myself that if Emma stayed close to you, Daniel would somehow lose his place in her life." She sighed. "I forgot that families grow, they don't replace one another." She looked down. "I encouraged distance when I should have encouraged love." The ballroom remained silent. Then Victoria walked across the room and stopped in front of Margaret. "I'm sorry." Margaret could see genuine regret in her eyes. She answered softly. "Thank you for saying it." Victoria nodded before returning to her seat. Moments later, Chloe stood up. For the first time since Margaret had met her, there was no confidence in her face. "I was cruel." She swallowed hard. "I thought I was protecting my brother." She looked directly at Margaret. "But really, I was protecting my own jealousy." Tears filled her eyes. "I never had the relationship with my mother that Emma has with you." The confession surprised everyone. "I convinced myself that if I couldn't have that kind of bond, no one else should either." Margaret slowly walked over to Chloe. "You don't become stronger by taking love away from someone else." Chloe nodded through tears. "I know." After a long moment, Margaret gently hugged her. The ballroom erupted into quiet applause. Emma wiped away tears while Daniel smiled with visible relief. Later that evening, the DJ announced one final surprise. Emma took the microphone. "When I was little," she began, "my mom used to tell me that the greatest gift you can give someone is making them feel like they belong." She smiled at Margaret. "Someone once suggested the best wedding gift would be my mother leaving our family." She paused. They were wrong. The room became perfectly still. "My mother isn't leaving this family. She's one of the reasons this family exists." Guests stood and applauded. Daniel walked over and embraced Margaret. "We're not losing a mother today. We're gaining another generation together." Laughter and applause filled the ballroom. As the evening came to an end, Margaret stepped outside onto the reception terrace. The stars sparkled above while music drifted through the open doors. Emma joined her. "You okay?" Margaret smiled. "I've never been better." Emma slipped her arm through her mother's. "I was afraid today would end with someone walking away." Margaret looked back through the windows at both families laughing together. It did. Emma frowned. What do you mean? Margaret smiled warmly. The fear walked away. For the first time since the engagement, everyone inside the ballroom wasn't divided by pride or insecurity. They were united by honesty, forgiveness, and the understanding that love multiplies when it's shared. As Margaret watched her daughter begin the next chapter of her life, she realized something she would treasure forever. The greatest wedding gift had never been leaving the family. It was knowing she would always have a place in it.